This morning, Princess Diana's brother, and an ugly week for politics. Not the time to call an election. You get the gag. Rishi Sunak accused of chickening out of a spring election. Finally, specifically, saying we won't all go to the polls at the start of May. Just as well for the Tories. Caught again in controversy after their biggest donor was allegedly caught making racist remarks about the MP Diane Abbott.
Will you give the money back, Prime Minister?
Which Downing Street took what felt like an age to admit.
Is the Prime Minister proud to be bankrolled by someone using racist and misogynist language?
Mr. Speaker, the alleged comments were wrong, they were racist.
The MP herself was denied the chance to speak out in the Commons, her anger playing later.
This is not about me. This is about the level of racism that there is still in Britain.
Yes. Mr. Lee Anderson.
While the Conservative booted out over comments about London's Muslim mayor defected to reform.
And like millions of people up and down the country, all I want is my country back.
So our big question this morning, when it comes to race, does politics have a problem? After that torrid week, the Conservative Cabinet Minister, Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary's here. Labour's attack dog warming up for the election, Jonathan Ashworth, will join us too. And privilege was no protection from pain. Charles Spencer, brother of Princess Diana, opens up about the abuse he suffered as a child at the hands of his headmaster.
He constructed his dream world of having 75 little boys at his beck and call for sadistic thrashings and sexual thrills.
Morning to you and to my team at the desk, the Labour MP, Harriet Harman, businessman and dragon, Theo Paphitis, and Samuel Kasumu, who worked in Number 10 for Boris Johnson. A very warm welcome to you all. Let's start, as we always do, with what's making the news this morning. Are there plots to replace the beleaguered Prime Minister with the sword-wielding Penny Mordaunt? Well, the Observer and the Sunday Telegraph think so. The Sunday Telegraph also picks up the government's new plans for traffic, which we will talk about a bit later on. The Sunday Times leads on Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, aborting a trip to Ukraine last week because of the threat of a Russian missile strike. But for the Sunday Mirror and the Sun on Sunday, their big story is Strictly. The Sunday Mirror bemoans Amanda Abbington pulling out last time round, and the Sun on Sunday claims that some of those who donned the sequins might make complaints to the BBC. And look at this, yet another fiery volcanic eruption in Iceland, the fourth since December. Residents of the town, Grindavik, have already been asked to leave the area, and the BBC will have more of those pictures through the day. Let's then start then with what the big issue has been in Westminster this week, the question of politics and race. Harriet, do you think politics has a problem with race still after your long tenure in Westminster?
Well, I think it's important on all politicians not to be divisive around the issue of race, and there should really be a consensus about that. And it makes me particularly apprehensive in the run-up to an election to see anybody ever trying to take advantage of it. But it's been a really terrible episode, what's happened to Diane Abbott, and it's also thrown a big spotlight on the problem of big money in politics. And
we'll talk about that a bit later. I mean, Samuel, you were working in politics, advising Boris Johnson. Do you think that even now in 2024 there is a problem with race in our politics?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the facts, under the Labour Party we've had the Ford Review, which was pretty damning about racism and racist incidents within Labour. Within the Conservative movement, we had the Swar and Singh review into Islamophobia within the party. So the facts do present a really damning picture. And so clearly there is a challenge that needs to be dealt with.
But it's interesting because some people might say, well, there's a real irony at the moment. We've just had Vaughan Gethings elected the first black leader as First Minister of Wales. Yesterday, you know, the Prime Minister is a proud British, Asian, Hindu. Do you think in your time watching politics that it's got worse, or are we just seeing more of something that was there already?
I think as a nation we are evolving, and the fact that we have leaders from minority ethnic backgrounds is both remarkable and unremarkable, which is a good thing. Yeah. But our politicians are struggling to deal with this evolution of our nation. I think they're struggling to articulate a moral high ground when there are challenges, and so yeah, the challenge is there, and we're not dealing with it as much as we should.
Theo, what do you think watching on from the world of business?
Well, you squirm. I very rarely agree with anything Diane Abbott says, but for Mr. Hester to say what he said, and I've heard it described as abhorrent and racist, I actually think it's criminal, and it's appalling. And I think that if he is a Tory party member, I mean, he should be thrown out that party. I've not heard if he has been or not. And it really, we talk about our politicians at the top end, and absolutely right, a fish rots from the top. If we're going to have this divisive politics that we're actually living through at the moment, unfortunately, that's the outcome.
Well, plenty to get stuck into with Mark Harper. Thank you all three of you for now. Many of you might never have heard of Frank Hester before this week, but it has been hard to avoid his name over the past few days, as we've been discussing, after he was alleged to have said the veteran MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women and should be shot. He later apologised for what he called rude comments, but plenty of others, including plenty of you who've been in touch, saw the remarks straight away as racist. But it took an age, in political terms at least, for Rishi Sunak to agree. And at a rally on Friday night in her London constituency of Hackney, Diane Abbott told the crowd that it wasn't just about her, it was about racism that still exists in the United Kingdom. Well, the Conservative cabinet...
This is about the way that black women are disrespected decade on decade.
Well, the Conservative Cabinet Minister and Transport Secretary Mark Harper is here. Thanks for joining us this morning. Did you straight away think these alleged comments were racist?
Yes, look, the Prime Minister made it very clear at Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday that they were racist.
Took him some time to do that. Did you think straight away they were racist?
Although you said it took an age in political terms, it didn't really take very long at all. The Prime Minister was very clear on Wednesday, and his spokesman had been clear the evening before, that they were racist comments. And they were unacceptable, and Mr. Hester apologised for those comments.
That's not actually what happened initially. It did take some time for Downing Street to say these comments were racist. They were rather dancing around that issue, in fact, until your cabinet colleague, Kemi Badenoch, said online these were clearly racist. That was not what Downing Street was saying on the record.
Well, look, I'm sure people wanted to make sure and check the facts. And the newspaper reports things, you do want to go and check the facts are correct, and then I think the Prime Minister was very clear about it, that they were racist comments and they were unacceptable and wrong, and he made that very clear. Both his spokesman made it very clear, and he himself made it very clear in the House of Commons on Wednesday. I was there, I heard him, he was very robust and clear about it.
You know, Mark Harper, that some of your colleagues did think it took too long, and they did think there was too much of a delay, because things happen very fast in politics. And what was interesting, and we had a very strong response from many of our viewers this week, it was clear straight away. I can give you some of their comments. Clive Phillips said the alleged statement was to most of the population obviously racist and misogynistic. Another viewer said they were horrible, hurtful, insensitive and racists. Another said, Chris Battle said they were clearly racist and sexist. Why did Downing Street not straight away agree with our viewers' description of these comments?
Well, look, we did agree with those descriptions. The Prime Minister was very clear about it. Look, I think you do want to just go and check your facts. You know, just because a newspaper reports something, you want to just go and check your facts. But we were very clear about it. They were racist comments. Mr. Hester apologised for those comments, and we said we should accept his apology,
but what
which we've done.
Facts were there to check? Because Downing Street was very happy to say these were rude, unacceptable, unpleasant comments. So nobody was denying, Downing Street was not denying at that point that this had taken place. It was their description of what those words meant. And forgive me for labouring this point, but this is absolutely vital.
Well, look, the Prime Minister was very clear about it, and I was there in the House of Commons on Wednesday. He couldn't have been clearer. I mean, having an argument about how many hours it took to say something, I don't really think is the issue here. The issue here is, well, I think the issue is the Prime Minister was very clear that those were racist comments, they were unacceptable, and he was absolutely clear about it in terms when he was asked about it in the House of Commons on Wednesday. You know, I was there, I heard him be very robust about
Having sent some of your colleagues out to say that they weren't to do with race and they weren't to do with gender, but you've made your point, you think Downing Street had to take its time. The other issue here is the money. So he is, as things stand, your biggest donor. We know he's given £10 million. I'll ask you in a second whether he's given more of that. But our viewer, Christopher Dunkley, wants to know, why are the Tories hanging on to cash from someone Sunak says has made racist comments? Why are you hanging on to the money?
Well, look, the Prime Minister was asked about this as well. Look, we took the donation. That was predated his comments, and we've declared that in the usual way, which is how people know that he's made that donation. He's made comments and he's apologised for them, and the Prime Minister's made it very clear that the donation stands.
So you don't think you should give the money back?
No, I don't. I think he's made comments, they were racist, they were unacceptable. The Prime Minister's made that very clear, and Mr Hester himself, and I think you carried that in your piece earlier, has apologised for saying
he has,
so he
and we should
clearly
make that clear.
recognises they were wrong as well.
But he has not apologised for them accepting that they were racist. He's apologised for making rude remarks, and that also, the specifics of his apology are also important here. Has he or has he not given the Conservatives another £5 million?
Well, look, we've declared the donation that he's made. I'm obviously not involved in donations to the party as the Transport Secretary. That's not what I'm involved with. If in the future there's a future donation, that will be declared in the usual way. But that's a hypothetical question that will be looked at. There are processes for looking at donations to political parties and declaring them. I'm not involved with those, but my understanding is if there was a future one, it would be looked at in the usual way and declared. But that is a hypothetical question. You know,
well, it's not really a hypothetical question. It's not really a hypothetical question, because there has been reporting this week from reputable organisations saying that he has offered another £5 million to the party. I think our viewers might have expected, with respect, Mark Harper, that you might have found this out before coming on our programme today, because this has been a matter of huge public interest. Did you not ask those involved to tell you?
The donations that he's made in the past have been accepted and they've been properly declared. That's how people know that they exist. If Mr Hester in the future were minded to make a donation to the party, that would be looked at in the usual way and declared. But that's a hypothetical question about what might happen in the future. But we know what's been declared about donations that have been made already. Those are on the record. That's how people know about them. What happens in the future is a hypothetical question which will be looked at in due course.
But it's not really a hypothetical question, because there is a clear suggestion that's been reported by reputable outlets that he's already given another £5 million to the Conservative Party. And I think for some of our viewers, they might listen to you not being able to tell us a straight answer this morning and think of what the Prime Minister said when he moved into number 10. I just want to listen to this.
This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level.
Now, he promised the highest levels of integrity and accountability. There's been a matter of enormous public interest this week over whether Frank Hester has given the Conservative Party £5 million more. Isn't it a contradiction between the promise that Rishi Sunak made to the country about being accountable, about integrity, that you can't tell us what's going on?
Well, look, the donations that Mr Hester's made in the past have been properly looked at, they've been accepted, and they've been declared in the open and transparent way that we're required to do and you expect us to do. If there are future donations, I don't know whether Mr Hester is going to make any donations in the future at all.
And you didn't ask anyone in the party whether he was giving more money before you came this morning?
I don't know whether he's going to be giving us donations in the future. If he were to do so, we have proper processes for checking that they are acceptable, and then they're declared in the usual way. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't know whether he's going to be minded to give us more money in the future, but there are proper processes, and then they will be declared in the usual way, as the Prime Minister said, so that they're very transparent and that people can make judgments accordingly.
Do the Conservatives have a problem with race?
Absolutely not. As the Prime Minister himself said this week, we're a party proudly led by the first British Asian Prime Minister with the most ethnically diverse cabinet there's ever been. And we're a party which welcomes people from across the United Kingdom, whatever their background, whatever their race. If they share our values and our approach to politics, we want everyone to be a member of the Conservative Party and feel very comfortable within it.
But some of them are not. The Tory peer Baroness Farsi, for example, has warned that it could be dangerous to take money from this man. Even the former Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, said there's a real problem with social cohesion this morning and that politicians must do much more to address it. He's even suggesting having a department of citizenship to combat this problem. And yet you're saying this morning there isn't a problem.
Well, look, I think the Prime Minister made it very clear this week in the House of Commons. Look, he leads a government which has got a very diverse cabinet. He's the first British Asian Prime Minister. And actually, something that Samuel said I think was very important was that he's the first British Asian Prime Minister. When he became the first British Asian Prime Minister, it wasn't a big deal. And I think that is quite important, actually. That wasn't the most important thing about him being Prime Minister. I think that says a lot about our country. And I think the Conservative Party should be proud that we've broken a lot of those barriers about those first.
Okay.
And I think that's a very strong message to people from across the country, whatever the background, that they should feel comfortable in the Conservative Party.
Okay, let's talk about a different kind of barriers, traffic barriers. Now, you're making an announcement today, what you're calling a crackdown on anti-road driver schemes in England. Now, we understand you're referring to what are known as low-traffic neighbourhoods. A lot of people, lots of people have them where they live, whether it's bollards or planters at the end of their roads or just, you know, go-slow schemes. What do you mean by cracking down on this?
Well, it's really about the schemes where councils haven't taken their communities with them. So, look, if a council puts in place a scheme and it's about trying to properly balance drivers and other road users, and they consult people properly and in the proper sense of that word, and they take their local community with them and the scheme is popular, we don't have a problem with that. That's fine. But we know there are specific examples, and we've seen them in the country. There's one in Jesmond in Newcastle. We've just seen one recently at Streatham Wells in London, which have had to be withdrawn.
Where the council decided to get rid of them.
Where the council didn't take people with it, didn't have local consent, pitted drivers against other road users. That's what we're trying to crack down on. So we're publishing statutory guidance to say to councils, you need to try and take communities with you. You need not to pit drivers against other road users.
Can you name, though, a council that didn't consult with the public? Because what council says, we already consult, it's part of what we do. Well, when you look at the schemes, and I've read your 79-page report about the schemes, actually in many places they're quite popular, or the evidence is definitely mixed. Can you tell us a council that didn't consult?
Well, there are schemes. If you look at the report, there were only 18% of people felt that they'd been properly listened to. There were examples that are in that report, for example, where disabled people and groups representing disabled people didn't feel they'd been listened to, and that made it difficult for those disabled people to have access to their homes.
But hang on, you refer to the report. In all areas, this is a quote from your report, in all areas, a higher proportion of residents were supportive than opposed.
Yes, but if you have a very significant proportion of people don't feel supportive of those schemes, and for example there were quotes there from emergency services suggesting that lives could be put at risk because some schemes haven't been properly thought through, that's a problem. So look, this is about sensible government, right? This is about making sure that communities are properly listened to. I've listened to people from communities where some of these schemes have been in place, where councils haven't listened to them. Where a local council is properly listening to its local community, does its consultation properly, and we've set out some examples in our statutory guidance about how you go about doing that, then no one has a problem. But I think it should be possible for people who walk, cycle, use public transport and drivers to sensibly coexist. This is about those schemes where it hasn't worked.
And if what you're saying, which sounds very reasonable, is what you want is to try and help councils find ways where everybody can be happy, everybody can be taken along, doesn't that rather reveal that you talking about a crackdown on anti-car schemes is you doing this for political reasons, which your rivals say is a bit desperate?
Well, no, I think there are places where councils haven't taken people with them. There were examples during the pandemic where there was no consultation. Things were driven through for ideological reasons, where people haven't taken them through. And there are schemes where councils do seem to be behaving like that, whether it's deliberate or otherwise. And I think what we're proposing is very sensible. And look, if councils listen to our guidance, that'll be fine. If they don't, we'll have to think about other measures, about funding and things like that in the future. But I think they're sensible proposals that were welcomed by people across the country.
OK, Mark Harper, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So it's great to have you with
Pleasure.
us in the studio. Well, what do you think? Have those low traffic zones been driving you mad? You can always email me, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or on social media, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura K. And if that isn't enough, on Thursdays, you can receive our new newsletter. You can sign up to that at bbc.co.uk/Laura K newsletter. Now, Samuel, what did you think of how Mark Harper answered our questions and our viewers' questions too about race in the Conservative Party?
Yeah, can I just say it's very frustrating for me when ministers say that we have the most diverse cabinet in history, and that is somehow a get out of jail free card. You know, when I was first involved in politics, it was folks like Richard Fuller, Nicholas Bowles, Elizabeth Berridge, white parliamentarians who saw a young guy from a working class background and thought I had potential. When I was in Downing Street when George Floyd was murdered, it was not the black or brown members of parliament who reached out and said, how can we bring communities together? It was Boris Johnson, despite some of the things that he said in the past, that was most interested in that. And now, of course, some of our most divisive politicians are people like Suella Braverman. And so, to paraphrase Martin Luther King, it is not the colour of your skin that matters when it comes to tackling racism and discrimination, bring communities together. It has to be the content of your character and your willingness to lead. And that is not what we're seeing today.
And you sound both frustrated and really disappointed that the party who, as you've just described, sort of took you in and encouraged you as a young black man is now doing this.
Yeah, because I know that we can do better. I know that there are people who have the right motives, who came into public life because they want to try to find a way to bring this country together, to bring us forward. But that's not what we're seeing. What we're seeing at the moment are politicians fudging their lines. There is absolutely no way that any minister would have been told to come out and not condemn those remarks as racist and misogynist if I was in Downing Street. And so the problem is not just the Prime Minister, it is also his advisors, people who were my former colleagues. I just do not know what they're playing at. We have to do better.
Theo, what did you make of how Mark Harper answered on that question? And also it's interesting, this also brings us into the issue of money and politics. Now, in the past, you have donated some money to the Conservatives and also to the Lib Dems. Nothing like the huge sums that Frank Hester has handed over.
Just enough as a few leaflets.
Just a few leaflets. But does this concern you?
It does concern me, and the lack of transparency now we're getting through government is even more concerning because of the divisive way that the politics are evolving. And Samuel quite rightly points out we have got, and it's correct what Mark Harper said, we have got one of the most diverse cabinets in the history of our politics, but they're not acting like it. And I think just because you are black or Asian or whatever doesn't mean that your thought patterns are in tune with the rest of society. And there's no question in my mind that those words were not just racist and abhorrent, but they're, I mean, just totally unacceptable. But why did he even feel comfortable in modern day society to be able to say that you would shoot somebody and the rest of the and hating all black women? I mean, why would anybody feel, what give him that power to be able to say that, unless the circles in which he's mixing, those conversations clearly take place?
But it's interesting there you talk about the rest of the country. Do you feel, as someone in business, that politics is out of step with the rest of the country that you see?
Sadly, it's been out of step for quite a while now, and I've been preaching that. I've gone on record to say we've found that politicians at the moment are looking after, number one, themselves first, their party second, and now the poor electorate a really bad third, and that's going to stop. And a divisive way that they're trying to play the political game will not just give them their end result, but be careful what you wish for, because the end result they might get is not the one that's going to suit any of us.
Harriet, your colleague Diane Abbott, who, like you, is an absolute trailblazer in Labour politics, she's been under, terrible abuse from people for a long time, but she's been clear this week also, in her view, Labour also has a problem with racism.
Well, when I heard Mark Harper say, no, we haven't got a problem, well, that indicates that you have. You have to recognise that even though there's been an advance of black people and women into politics, there is still, and in fact, an even greater backlash, and that is what people are facing. And, it was so obvious, that comment that was made, that it was racist and misogynist, and, as Theo says, downright dangerous in a context where we've had 2 members of Parliament killed. The only explanation is because of the money, is that they hesitated to say what it was, because they've accepted such a huge amount for their election war chest and are clearly negotiating for more. And what the Conservatives did at the end of last year is they upped the amount of money that parties can spend at elections to enable themselves to spend more. And I think that there's a real problem with not only racism and sexism in politics, but big money in politics, which needs to be clamped down on.
And that has often been a very, very toxic mix of money and politics, no question about that. But on that question about Diane Abbott's view, is that Labour also has a problem with racism. Is she right?
We absolutely have further to go. We have to keep a hawk eye on it. The danger of actually ensuring you tackle discrimination is complacency. So I think you should you should always look at your own thoughts, your own actions, because, we've got a really big context here. The Fawcett Society did research last year which showed that 75% of black women have experienced discrimination at work. I mean, that is the context. So who can say there is no problem? We've got to recognise it's been a terrible, evil problem, toxic in politics and generally. And we have to be part of fighting against it, and not saying, we're all right. That would be wrong.
And should Diane Abbott be allowed back into the Labour Party? I mean, it's nearly a year that she's been investigated for a letter that she wrote to the papers.
Well, we've got an independent complaints procedure, and I don't like to second guess them. And I very strongly support Keir Starmer's drive against anti-Semitism. It had to be rooted out of the party. But I would be sad if Diane Abbott ends her political career, and she has been an amazing trailblazer, not a member of the Labour Party, which is how she came into politics in the first place.
To Jonathan Ashworth from the Labour Party about that in a few minutes. But Theo, just as you're here with all your business experience, obviously the huge events of the last few days in politics have sort of drowned out what might normally be an ongoing discussion of the budget. Did the budget improve anything as far as you can see?
No, it's very disappointing. It was the last act of a very demob happy bunch, to be honest with you. No effort was made to do anything creative with ingenuity that would raise more money for the Treasury. Because on one hand, we know the Treasury, we all know it needs more money to pay for the essential services, especially NHS. But then to say, actually, we're going to have efficiencies, which means cutbacks in normal language, and then to do very little else to raise further income, which the Treasury keeps saying it needs. And there is so many opportunities to raise more income to be able to support the country and the economy, and they were all left alone. Least of all, of course, the damage to our local high streets being caused by business rates, which are going to go up by 6% when inflation, they say, is going to go down to 2%. And it's just ridiculous.
I just have to ask you that Hugh Farley-Whittingstall was here last week, and he said actually there's lots of really wealthy people who'd like to pay more tax. Would you like to pay more tax? Fancy it?
Nobody, anyone that says that, nobody wants to pay more tax, because I can use my money to do much better things than giving it to the government and do more good. But we'll put that to one side. But the reality is there's opportunities not just for the same people to pay more tax, there's opportunity to collect tax from people who are not paying tax. That's the point.
That's a different question. All right, all three of you, thank you. Fascinating. We'll be back with you a bit later in the programme. Now, Charles Spencer's speech at his sister Princess Diana's funeral is seared in the country's memory. His fury at how his sister had been hounded by the paparazzi was hot and raw. But more than 25 years later, he's now revealing the secrets of his early life, hidden away by aristocratic stiff upper lip. He's written a compelling book about violent and sexual abuse at the boarding school he was sent to when he was just 8 years old. And he told me how he and Diana were hurt by one of their nannies, Nanny Foster, as children at home. I went to meet him at his family's 18th century London home, Spencer House, and we began by talking about his first day at boarding school.
I remember the shock of the journey that day and being dropped there by my father. My father, a very sweet, decent, loving man. And I look back and I know he hated doing it. In fact, he told me that was the worst day of his fathering for me. I went back through my family records, a lot of the people who lived here, over 300 years, and you can see this sort of conspiracy among the adults. They knew how brutal it was going to be for the little boys being sent away. And I don't blame my parents or any of the other parents for thinking it was the done thing at that time. I think the idea was that it was essential to blend with people from similar backgrounds and to take the hard knock, the real brutal sort of heartbreak of being sent away from home. And in return, you were going to be privileged and part of a set that you could rely on for the rest of your life.
You say you felt cast out by your family, though. Does that feeling ever go away?
I think one of the things I had, actually, for the book were my letters home, and I see this theme when I read them, that I'm always apologising. And I think I know that that was because the only way I could make sense of being sent to boarding school at such a vulnerable age was that I must have failed somehow as a son. And I don't think any child should really have to feel that.
Even before, though, you were sent away to school, you talk about some elements of your upbringing. You talk also about one of the nannies that looked after you and your sister banging your heads together painfully. That kind of discipline and perhaps that kind of violence, do you think that element of that at home had an effect on you and your sister before you were even sent away?
I think that really damaging violence to children is going to affect them, whatever house they come from, whatever family they're born into. And that nanny who did that to us, she used to crack our heads together if we both found to have done something naughty, obviously without my father's knowledge. But it really hurt. It wasn't a tap on the wrist. It was a cracking crunch, and I remember it still. I have two older sisters, and only later was it found out that the different nanny was punishing them by ladling laxatives down them, and my parents couldn't work out why they were constantly ill. So you were dealing with a very unstructured world of privileged parents living parallel lives to their children.
But you and Diana and your other sisters were then brought up even in a home environment where staff, nannies who were hired to look after you were hurting you.
Again, I don't think we realised that that was wrong. We knew it was painful, and we knew it was something we wanted to avoid. But I think children don't know morality necessarily at that stage, or certainly the law. So it was something that we lived with.
Let's talk then about when you arrive at school. And in the book, page after page after page describes terrible violence, what seems clearly like forms of paedophilia, terrible abuse, and you set it out compellingly, brutally, and very honestly. Is there a moment, though, in amongst all of that, that still particularly haunts you?
I think the problem, why I called it a very private school, was because it was dominated by a particular figure, the headmaster, who closed down the school to the outside world. He constructed his dream world of having 75 little boys at his beck and call for sadistic thrashings and sexual thrills. If I look at one incident, it seems so minor. If I look at the catalogue of horrible things that happened, was this chilling moment when he caught us all in my dormitory and the sheer rattling joy in his voice as he called us over for a thrashing. I was beaten lots of times, but there was one particular beating which was so violent and painful that I had to deal with that separately as a sort of therapeutic session 20 or 30 years later, because it was so shocking.
You just said, oh, it was a minor thing. It's not a minor thing for a young boy to be thrashed violently by an adult, by a strong man.
He was addicted. he very much enjoyed hurting little boys, and his trick was using a cane. He had various canes with their own names, and his signature was cutting, this is pants down, cutting the buttocks with 5 strokes and then putting the 6th one across the 5. It was something about the focused aggression and what I would now call sexual gratification that came through that evening. That's what shook me.
There was also, though, sexual abuse actually from a female staff member. I mean, you were groomed.
Yes.
As an 11-year-old, she was an assistant matron at the school, twice your age, someone who you should have been able to trust. What happened and what effect did that have on you in later years?
I think to set the context, this was a school without feminine touch at all. There was one very tough, deeply aggressive matron in charge of the sort of matronly things, clothes, etc. And it seemed so wonderful to have a younger female member of staff who was 20. And I remember I was sent halfway through a term to a dormitory just outside her room in the attics. And she started by giving...
She had sweets for
Sweets,
you.
well, grapes and biscuits and all that sort of thing. And then she started seducing me, and others actually, but, as far as I was concerned, I was suddenly the focus of some feminine warmth. And it started with lots of long, long kisses of a sort I didn't really understand at all. French kissing was not something I knew anything about. And then it progressed further. And I mean, I have to say, and I don't know, I've not talked to many victims of sexual abuse at a young age. It was almost a thrilling secret. I didn't know how wrong it was. I certainly didn't know it was a crime.
It's incredible to imagine that nobody knew, that nobody told. What was it like living in that culture of secrecy? Did you think about telling other people? Did you think about telling your parents? Did you think about telling other people in your life?
You're right, there was a culture of secrecy, and alongside that ran a very strong, I think the biggest rule, unwritten rule in the school, was don't tell tales. Of course, that's very self-serving for an abusive environment. And I actually felt, even writing this book, I felt occasions where my conscience said, you're sneaking, you're telling tales on the school, even now, a few decades on. We came from backgrounds where conversations with parents were not as they would be on the whole today. I didn't tell anyone until, in fact, the first family members I told were my 2 surviving sisters who were in their mid to late 60s, and that was about a year and a half ago, because I thought I'd better warn them what was going to come out in this book, and they were absolutely stunned.
Something you write in the book is that when Diana was being sent away to school, she said to your father, if you loved me, you wouldn't leave me here. Do you think she was also hurt or affected by being sent away?
Well, first of all, I'm so proud of her for saying that. It's so incredibly impactful, to the point that my father remembered it. I would say any child, I believe, under teenage years, under 13, I don't think they should be sent away. I don't think it's fair. I don't think they can possibly understand what's going on. There are a lot of teenagers who think, great, I want to get away from my parents, and that's fine. I mean, of course it's a personal decision, but I don't think any child personally should be sent away before they hit puberty.
When you were there in that terrible environment, you write about how you were self-harming, you were making yourself sick. It was very poignant to read of that, of course also with people being aware of what Diana went through. Did you ever discuss those experiences with her?
No. So I've not been diagnosed with anything from that time, but it's quite clear to me I had bulimia at one stage. And mine was very much of connected to a need for some attention. I say it in the book, I felt like I was drowning in an adult sea. We had metal chamber pots under our bed in case we were sick in the night. And I used to make myself vomit. And I'd take it to the matron to show her. And it was, I realised, a complete cry for attention and help. And I never discussed that sort of the mental illness things really with Diana. And certainly not, we grew up together. I don't remember us ever discussing anything from boarding school at all.
She, though, has such a reputation for being able to show incredible empathy What do you think she would make of this now, knowing what you went through as a young boy, as a tiny boy?
I think she'd have been pretty cross and appalled. And yeah, I think she would have been stunned, actually. And the fact that I went to such a tricky place, I think she would have found hard.
I know you don't want to discuss the specifics around your nephews, William and Harry, but do you think that boarding school experiences have made it harder for the aristocracy in this country to have healthy family relationships?
I couldn't answer that because I can only really talk about myself, I think. It's too personal to trample on other people's family with a view on something as important as that. My personal view is, I mean, I've had 7 children, and I would never send any of them away. If they wanted to go away, they could or can. 2 of them chose to go weekly boarding in their mid-teens. But I couldn't have done it to them. I couldn't have said, right, you're going. I just couldn't. It'd break my heart.
And it's interesting, you asked your contemporaries at school to describe what you were like.
Yes.
And they used the word angry.
Yes.
And you were angry for a long time. And everybody was a witness to some of your completely understandable anger, of course, publicly in September 1997. Did the frustration, do you think, at some of the ill treatment of your sister Diana come from some of that buried hurt from school?
I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down. It is baffling. My own and only explanation is that genuine goodness is threatening to those at the opposite end of the moral spectrum.
That sense, perhaps, that you finally wanted to stand up to bullies?
I used to take on the press a fair amount, so that's connected to this school because I had an absolute hatred of injustice and non-truth. And so perhaps when I gave the eulogy at Diana's funeral, it's hopping on a generation from that because of their impact on her death.
In terms, though, of the provocation that you felt then, driven by paparazzi and the treatment of your sister Diana by the press, if you look now in 2024 at how the paparazzi has sort of developed into this kind of online circus, this online free-for-all, do you think the dangers of that are perhaps more potent? And if we look at what's happening now around the current Princess of Wales, do you think the dangers of that online, almost sort of conspiracy world are more potent than the press intrusion that you have fought against?
No, I think it was more dangerous back in the day. I think, yeah, if I look back to 97 and Diana's death, I think that was so shocking to, the circumstance of her death was so shocking that it did make the industry that supports the paparazzi really consider more carefully what it could and couldn't do. Not because they had a moral judgment, but because it was unacceptable to the public.
Do you worry, though, about what's happened to the truth?
I do worry about what happened to the truth.
And in terms of the impact on you, having written this book, you know, you sat on this for decades because of that culture of fear and the silence that was imposed upon you. What was the effect on you of finally putting pen to paper?
It took me into very dark places inside of me. I had endless nightmares. I didn't know the appalling things, the really serious things that had happened to some of my friends and contemporaries. And I'd come back from having met them and interviewed them and be in pieces. And then, actually, at the end of last year, when I'd finished the book, I had a bit of a breakdown again. And I had to go into a residential treatment for trauma for writing this book.
You say it got very dark.
Yes, I got to a place where everything seemed rather pointless. Not suicidal, but everything seemed absolutely pointless because I think I don't think it's an overstatement to say confronting evil is a very well, it's cataclysmic, really, or it can be. I've always been intrigued by what humans are capable of doing to each other. And even my friends would be amazed to know I haven't had a drink for many, many weeks, and just centering myself. And I have EMDR, which is a form of therapy for PTSD.
Have other people who hadn't spoken out before come to you since then? And if anyone is suffering from abuse and they don't yet have the courage to speak out, what would you say to them?
They must speak out. I think so many of these people, when I approached them, I said, what's your memory of this place? And they went, oh, no, I've put that away in a box for 50 years. And then when they opened it, I could see them come alive and be happier. And obviously, I'm not a therapist, I'm not qualified, but I hope I was a trusted ear. I do think telling people close to you, I had an email from someone 3 years older than me at Madewell, and he wrote to me, he said, no, I just want you to know that you writing this book, I've been with my wife for 40 years. I've just told her what I went through at Madewell, and we spent the last hour crying together. You know, I went to a restaurant last night, and I was early, and the maitre d' came up, and he just whispered to me, I just want to thank you. I went to a school like that, and I've never told anyone, and it's everywhere.
Power in the truth.
I like to think so.
Charles, thank you so much indeed for speaking to us today. It's been fascinating. Thank you.
Well, in a statement, Madewell Hall School said it was sorry about the experiences Charles Spencer and some other pupils had. It said almost every facet of school life has evolved significantly since the 70s, in particularly the safeguarding of welfare and children. But if you or your family have been affected by any of the issues raised in that discussion, there's lots of information about organisations that can help support on the BBC Action Line. And you can see a longer version of that interview on the BBC iPlayer or listen in a special episode of Newscast. They're both available for you now. Now, back to politics. Earlier, we talked to the Conservative Cabinet Minister, Mark Harper, about the attack on Diane Abbott. She said too, the actions of the Labour leadership had also been disappointing. Ms Abbott was suspended by Labour last April after writing that Irish, Jewish and traveller people were not subject to racism all their lives. But nearly a year on, she's still waiting to find out whether she'll be allowed back into the party. Well, Labour's Jonathan Ashworth is here. Welcome. Good to have you here with us in the studio. Harriet Harman has told us this morning. Angela Rayner, Deputy Leader, the Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, they've all said they would like to see Diane Abbott sitting again as a Labour MP. Would you?
Well, first of all, can I say I can't imagine what Diane has been through this week. I think it is well documented that Diane is the Member of Parliament who gets the most abuse. For her to open the newspapers this week and not only read this reprehensible, racist, disgusting comments about her, but to read that somebody was talking about how she should be shot. This is in the context of two of our parliamentary colleagues being murdered in recent years, and then to see the Tories take so long to even acknowledge the racism and still refuse to hand back the £10 million which is bankrolling their party. I think that shows you the depths to which the Tory party has sunk to. On the particular issue, and I'm afraid I probably am going to frustrate you here in this interview, there is an independent process that looks into these matters. I can't second guess that process. I have in the past served on Labour's National Executive Committee, so I understand these processes have to be free from political interference.
But my question was, Jonathan Ashworth, would you like to see her back as a Labour MP?
Diane is a good colleague, and I have I am in awe of everything she has achieved over many years.
So would you like to see her back
But I am
in
not
the party?
going to pressure the independent process. It's important these processes take their course. And the reason I am not casually indifferent to what has gone on, not just this week, but the abuse that Diane has had over many years.
And she believes that the Labour Party itself has racism within its ranks.
And we must not be complacent about racism. We must challenge it. We must challenge Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. If we see that in the Labour Party, as we do when we see it in society at large. But the point I'm making is, if you have an independent process, that is important, not just for this particular case, but for every other case this independent process looks at.
And our viewers will understand what you've said there about having people that look at this specifically. But what many people might find almost bewildering is the letter that she published that was in the Observer newspaper was 126 words long. Today, it's 330 days since it was published. She apologised almost immediately. How on earth has it taken so long? And it's important also for our viewers to understand, in other cases, there was Rupa Huq, another Labour MP, who called Kwasi Kwarteng superficially black, then apologised. She was allowed back within 5 months. An investigation into another colleague of yours, Andy MacDonald, that was just under 5 months. So in this case, why has it taken nearly a year to look at what Diane Abbott said in a 126-word letter?
Well, I mean, I said a few moments ago, I am going to frustrate you in this interview because you're asking me questions which I, quite properly, do not know the answer to. Because if it's an independent process, they're not going to be telling me as a politician the ins and outs of what is going on in every step of the way. So I understand the frustration. I can well imagine there are viewers very frustrated going, oh, there's a typical politician not answering the question on all that. But the simple truth is, if you have an independent process, I don't get reports on it. That process has to be allowed to look into all the matters without political pressure, as it does for every other case that is brought before it.
But do you find it frustrating? Do you find it frustrating having to answer questions about something that has dragged on for so long?
Well, I can well understand why people want answers to this. Of course I can. Of course I can. I'm not daft. Of course we want to see answers to this. And you're right. I mean, I want to be talking about, the upcoming general election, the Tory leadership election, and all of that sort of stuff, and Labour's plan to rebuild the country. Of course I do. But I do want to come back to this problem. And the reason I say this, and I hope the viewers don't think I'm coming across as overly official in my response, is that I've been a member of the Labour NEC. I know how these things...
Governing committee of the party.
Yes, I know how these things work. I know how solicitors can sometimes get involved, and that what people say on programmes like this can be used in the debates and in the discussions that go on when it's supposed to be an independent process. And,
OK, can you guarantee that it will conclude before the general election?
Well, I mean, I would hope so, and I would hope that parliamentary colleagues, all of whom are involved in a complaint being investigated, I would hope that all of these things get concluded in a timely manner.
OK. One of the big things that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks is the government's cuts to national insurance. Now, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, was here last week, and lots of viewers got in touch afterwards to say they'd been very impressed by some of the things she had to say. But later in the week, she said the Conservatives are going to massively cut the NHS and state pensions because they want to phase out national insurance contributions. But the money raised from NI is not specifically allocated for those areas. So why is Labour being misleading on this issue?
We're not remotely being misleading, because what we saw in the budget was the government announce an unfunded £46 billion bombshell. That's £1 billion more than Liz Truss. And the question is, where is the money coming from to fund that £46 billion? Is it borrowing, with the potential consequence for mortgages, as we saw with Liz Truss? Is it cuts to the state pension or the NHS? Or is it a new merged tax? And if so, that would mean pensioners paying around £800 more on their tax. And your point about it's misleading, I'm afraid it's not. National insurance goes into the National Insurance Fund. In law, that fund is separated, and the money from that fund goes to the state pension, and a proportion goes to the NHS.
It hasn't been specifically allocated for those things for many years. But
it is. That's in law. That's in law,
which is a very important point.
But it is. If you look
Labour is now claiming that the Tories have offered an unfunded billions and billions of pounds of tax cuts. They have been clear this week. It is a long-term aspiration. Jeremy Hunt said it would be the work of many, many parliaments. By telling our viewers that this is something like the Liz Truss immediate tax cuts, which cause mayhem in the economy, that's not the case. They've been clear it's the work of many, many parliaments. You can disagree with it if you like, of course you can. But it's misleading to tell people again and again that this is some kind of unfunded, crazy tax cut, that it would come in straight away.
It's perfectly legitimate to question where the £46 billion will come from to fund this bombshell. And if you sever the link between your national insurance contributions and the state pension, what does that mean for the future of the state pension? In the Daily Express yesterday, Silver Voices, a campaign group on behalf of pensioners, were questioning whether this means the Tories want to means test the state pension in the future. I think the state pension is under threat as we know it under this plan from the Tories.
Well, of course, that is bound to be an issue of great discussion in the general election. Just before you go, you made a bet the election would be in May. Do you want to wager it's going to be the autumn, or are you still sticking to late spring, summer?
I mean, it's utterly chaotic, isn't it? And the government that are not putting the national interest first. Is it a general election or a Tory leadership election? This instability is not in the national interest. They should name the date and stabilise matters as soon as possible.
OK, Jonathan, that's first. Great to have you with us in the studio this morning. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Well, it is nearly 10 o'clock. Time's raced by. And we started today by asking if our politics has a problem with race. But the Conservative Cabinet Minister, Mark Harper, said no.
Absolutely not. As the Prime Minister himself said this week, we're a party proudly led by the first British Asian Prime Minister with the most ethnically diverse cabinet there's ever been. And we're a party which welcomes people from across the United Kingdom, whatever their background, whatever their race, if they share our values and our approach to politics.
Well, I just think that issue and national insurance we were just discussing with Jonathan Ashworth are both bound to be issues as we hurtle towards the election at some point. Samuel, if you were still in number 10 right now, would you have been in the camp saying, come on, go for it, let's get it done, or in the hang on, let's hope that something turns up and stick around to the autumn?
Definitely hang on. I don't think now is the right time to go, well, as a Conservative, to the electorate, because the outcome would be shocking.
Well, I was going to say, last time you were here, you said a slightly rude, disobliging word about the former Prime Minister. I didn't know where you were going to with it then. But do you think the chances, as someone who's worked with the Tory party, do you think the chances that they could be able to turn it around?
I think, well, firstly on the national insurance, the idea of a simplification of the tax system makes sense, and it's a very sensible aspiration. I think the economy is turning around, inflation is coming down, etc. But it has to be more than just fixing the economy. There needs to be an articulation of a vision that people will want to get behind. And of course, Rishi Sunak isn't quite there yet. And I don't know if by autumn he or whoever will get there.
Well, a week's a long time in politics, so 6 months is a century. Theo, who would you invest in at the moment politically? If you look at the picture, you sound a bit gutted about the state of it all, really.
It's all very disappointing. I mean, the Tories have just done such a rubbish job over the last 7 or 8 years. They spent all the time looking inwards in themselves and actually doing the job that we've elected them to do. So they have no right to stay in power whatsoever, and they can't justify it.
Are you in for any of the others? Because you gave it to the Lib Dems before.
Of course, the interesting thing about the Labour Party, they're unknown. And at the moment, we haven't seen the manifesto yet. And I'm more interested to see their manifesto before absolutely putting my foot in any camp.
OK, well, Harriet, I want to show viewers something really lovely, a picture we found of you. When you'd just been elected 1982, you are not standing at the general election. How do you feel about saying goodbye to it all?
Well, I think I'm going to feel quite liberated, actually, because it's a massive privilege to be an MP, but it's also a massive responsibility, because for every day you're an MP, you're the one and only MP for that constituency, 365 days a year. So I think I'm going to be liberated, but I don't know what I'm going to do with my liberation. But my mum lived till she was 100, so I've probably got about 30 years left to do something. Anyway, I'm going to chair the Fawcett Society, which I'm really looking forward to.
A very noble aim. Well, if you're feeling liberated, you'll always be welcome to come back and see us in the studio again, as will you two both. Thank you so much, the three of you, for being with us this morning. Thank you, of course, for you spending your Sunday morning with us on a day when we've been talking about some of the really fraught issues in our politics these days. Rows over money, rows over race that many MPs and perhaps many of you thought had been or should have been consigned to the past. And we've had another reminder of how that toxic mix of cash and politics can get very tricky. You can watch anything again on the iPlayer, of course, and don't forget the full version of our conversation with Charles Spencer, Diana's brother.
That took too long, really did. Can you not put that on a Sunday? It's fucking depressing. I was raped. Yeah, I don't really want to listen to that on a Sunday. Like, I get it. Painful. I don't want to listen to it on a Sunday while I'm smoking a spliff and having a beer. I don't want to hear that kind of shit, you know what I mean? It's sad. That's why I don't want to hear it. I'm in a good mood. Don't want to hear that shit. Anyway, apart from the sad, mad, depressing interview. Politics. Mad, innit? 87% of the British people are white. Oh, there's racism. Bro, really? You only just noticed? I'm just asking. What planet do you live on? What country do you live in? I mean, see, this is the thing. It's trying to say the Tories are multicultural, so therefore can't be racist, which is stupid, clearly. If you know anything about anything, you know that's a stupid statement. But people believe it. We got a black prime minister, we can't be racist. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. As I smoke my spliff. Shut up. Of course you can be racist and black. Especially if you like the money fucking... I was just going to say, you like the money green. You like the fucking colour of someone's money, right? That's all these people cared about. They don't care about if they're black. Bro, you're poor. That's what they cared about. Think about it. They see you as a bank check thing, whatever the fuck you want to call it. They don't see the colour of your skin. Bitch, how rich are you is what I want to know. They don't care what colour you are. They don't give a fuck. This is the thing. You're going to give them this money back? Fuck no. Why would I do that? Bitch, I'm going to take his money. He can say what the fuck he wants. It's kind of funny though, because it's freedom of speech, innit? We don't have freedom of speech. We have freedom of, do you want to get punched in the face or not? Which is kind of different, but it's on the same scale. So you do get racist people in every society. Just pointing out the obvious to anybody who doesn't fucking pay attention. So it's not going to be advantageous for someone to go, hey, I'm racist, hey, do you want some money? Right? I'm just saying. So, do I think the world's getting madder? No, I think it's always been mad. I just think that now it's on, like, the telly. Which is funny. Of course, Britain's racist. Name me a country that isn't a bunch of class. Honestly. Name me one country that got shit out of his green ass and said you're perfect. No country's perfect. So I don't find this as shocking as much as the people who just discovered racism are shocked. Oh my god, racism. It's like watching American politics. And you get loads of like mad racists there. Yeah, no shit. You get them everywhere. It's just weird. Like our electoral process is breaking down, sadly, somehow. Well, not somehow, it's the internet. It's definitely the internet. But I mean, it's getting stupider by the day. Like the first thing she said, I couldn't even understand it. I was like, what are you talking about? Politics, racist shit. I was like, is that even like grammatically correct? Is our politics getting racist? I'm like, what the fuck do you even fucking mean? What? How's that a sentence? That makes any sense? The country's always been mental and racist, but not in the way you would think. British racism is very weird, but now we're getting the American version. And therein lies the problem, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting the American version of racism, which is, I'm a racist, I'm proud. British people don't do that whole I'm racist and proud thing. You have to have a thick skin if you want to go around doing that. Like a proper thick skin. So either people are just taking liberties more, or people are just not asked about good manners, which we do care about in England, just so you know. And Britain as a whole, I would say. Manners, please, thank you, open the door, etc. You know, get up off your chair if an old lady gets on the bus. You know the routine. Quiet in a queue. Don't panic. It's only a queue. We could make a cup of tea. Get the point, right? So English people have a different way of being racist. I think the way these fuckers are being racist is blatantly American, MAGA style. I think that's the difference. Because I do watch a lot of American politics, as you well know. Don't stream it, but I do watch it. I don't know if you like American politics on it. Probably stream that. It's just as boring, really. Because it's mostly C-SPAN. You can't really stream American TV shows because you definitely get kiboshed. Or I've seen plenty of channels get killed when they try and like do political shows or whatever. I mean, most of them do it for money. I don't do it for money anyway, so it doesn't matter. Point is, anyway, Tories, garbage. Okay, I'm just going to go mad this way. Elections. When Britain, England, per se, decided to leave the EU, and people talk about the Red Wall. You know, the Red Wall is very conservative, right? This is the weird thing. A Labour Party supporter from the north is a very conservative person. But they like the idea of collectivism. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but it's actually true. They're very conservative. They like the idea of one man, one woman, 2 kids. Have a job. Your wife has a job. Whatever, right? Very simple folk. Like hobbits. But up north. So they're very conservative in their views. Now, are they racist? Some of them are. That's for sure. But why did they vote for Brexit? One would ask. Because Britain is a xenophobic country by its very nature. It has to be. We live on an island. I don't know if anybody does psychology, but this is literally the facts. We live on a fucking island and everybody invaded us. We've got some kind of mad complex when it comes to that shit, right? We've got some weird complex. So we like the whole, we're multicultural, but we love the idea even more that we live on a fucking island and no one's invading us. World War II, etc. And there's plenty of people here, just in case you don't know, in World War II, that the British family had, I would put it as a family, even though it was an empire, but whatever, horses for courses. So there was those people here anyway, connection-wise, because we were the mother country. It's so easy to come from a country that is in the Commonwealth to Britain. You know, like I can get in Australia easier than most people because I'm English. I know I don't have a criminal record, so I can definitely get into Australia. Get the point. You can't get in if you fucking got a criminal record, by the way. You just, which I think is a good idea. Don't really want people with criminal records coming into your country, do you? I mean, not like mental ones. My country likes some mental people about me. But anyway, that's another story altogether. Point is, Tories are shit. I went off on like 20 tangents then. The Tories are poo. Labour aren't any better. And are all parties racist? Yes. Is that going to have any effect on the election? No. I don't think it will. I think the race thing is just a long list of, oh my fucking god, they're still in power kind of feeling that the rest of the country has. We don't even care about the race thing. Nobody's that dumb. Yet we know some parts of Britain are racist. We fucking do. No shock. Are some parts a bit more Muslim than others? Probably, yeah. No one really cares as long as you don't have fucking mad riots and whatever. Which we don't, so that's always good. But I would love to see us riot and get these fucking idiots out of power. Because they're just bad. I don't know what that black dude's name was. I apologise. This black dude here. Not you. You're clearly not black. You're clearly not him. God, where's that other dude? His name's Russell, I think. Oh, I don't know. He won't even let me go backwards now. Okay. Where is he? That dude there. He articulated the Tories the best. It doesn't matter what colour you are if you don't have the right character as a person. I think that's our problem. We elect people with zero fucking character as politicians in terms of like what they believe in. They're just scummy cunts who just want money. Money, money, money. It's mad. Like, imagine being the Prime Minister and having £750 million in your bank and then taking taxpayers' money to be Prime Minister. Like, don't you think that's a piss take? I do. Like, if you're going to be Prime Minister, fine. Do you need to be that rich, though? It's like a piss take. Especially when I'm paying your fucking wages. You're not broke, are you? No, I don't think so. So why? And why is he paying that racist guy? Or getting racist guy flights in helicopters? Can't you just buy your own helicopter? You're worth $750 million. 750 million Scooby-Doos. You're not broke. you're definitely not broke. Imagine how many yearly wages he has with that amount of money. By himself. He could literally pay someone's wages for life. He could pick a random human. I'm going to pay your wages for life. And he wouldn't even miss it. That's mad, isn't it? He gets paid more interest on his bank account than you earn mostly in a fucking year. And people go, there's no money. Oh no, there's loads of money, trust me. There's more money than you can count. The problem is nobody on the lower end of the spectrum gets any of it. And that's crazy, because you make money from money. How does that even work, making money from money? I'm going to bet on your country going down and that'll give me money. It's crazy, isn't it? It's like Monopoly, but shitter. Because it's real life, not a fucking a game. Off on a tangent again. Sorry, I'm going all what's it called? Anarchist. Going all fucking anarchist. No, not really. I just take the Tories, they're garbage. I made a bet. Not a bet, I didn't lose any money. Made a prediction, shall we say, that the Tories are going to lose their biggest seat majority since 1906. Or was it 1956? I don't know, it was on Twitter. Someone asked me, what would be their biggest defeat? One was 1997. The other one was, I think, was 1956. Or 1906. I think I picked 1906. They got 158 seats or some weird shit. I was thinking, if the swing's massive, maybe we could... Because I'm thinking 1997, right? Tony Blair. If you look at the polls, it could be dramatically worse than 1997. It's not the fact that Labour are actually any good, which is mad. The Tories are just shit. They're just literally garbage. And you got Mr. Lion's Den there, whatever the fuck it's called. Dragon's Den. Sorry, Lion's Den. Whatever. Dragon's Den dude, Leo. He's saying, let me see the Labour Party manifesto. Because we haven't seen it yet. The election hasn't been kicked off. It's still like dead government mode. Which is probably why I don't stream that much. Because it is a bit dead. I do try though. It's a bit dead, you know. I don't know. I really want the Tories to get a kicking. But then I'm scared because the Tories are going to go so far to the right, even more than they're trying. There's a MAGA fight going on in the Conservative Party, just like MAGA in America. If you look at the Republican RNC convention, or whatever the fuck they're called, they've just been taken over by Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, bro. That's some mad shit. The RNC, that's the Republican fundraising machine. You know, they go around, put up chairs and shit and say, give me money. Bit like a church, but for people. Or whatever. Anyway, point is, the RNC got taken over by the Trumps. And it's kind of like the mad fuckers are taking over the Tories. Kemi Badenoch, she's fucking mental. Suella Braverman, they're going to be the next prime minister, not ex-prime ministers, thankfully. They're going to be the leaders of the opposition, one of them. Either Suella Braverman or fucking Kemi Badenoch. Liz Truss is going to be in there. Oh my god, can you imagine Liz Truss, Kemi Badenoch, and Suella fucking Braverman on the front bench? Oh my fucking days. That is... That's scary shit. It's like I'm living in Warhammer 40k or some shit. It's terrible. Anyway, I'm going to go now because it's Sunday and I'm fucked, and you know why I'm fucked. If you don't know why I'm fucked, you should probably put the football news on. Or whatever. Anyway. See you on Wednesday, maybe, if I can be asked. I forgot about Thursday, not my fault. I'll probably try and be here this Thursday. Anyway, if you don't see me, I still love you. Stay safe.